Okay. We are going to transition. Hello. Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We are the 24th of February, Saturday evening, Central European Time. I doubt that this hour we'll have anyone watching us, so we'll make this quick and succinct. And we just wanted to follow up a little bit on yesterday's live stream concerning Jacques Lacan. And we're trying to look uniquely into him right now, kind of out of the context of Deleuze and Pierre-Félix Guattari. And we're going to try again, like we did last night, just to look a little bit at Slavoj Žižek and to understand how his Hegelianism and his passion for Lacan leads him to interpret contemporary capitalistic society, specifically via his idea. I wouldn't even call it a concept of ideology, and how that is how contemporary society operates, principally through ideology, and this comes essentially through Jacques Lacan via Sigmund Freud. But before that, I'm just going to share a little bit of silly things we came across today. I'm going to see if I can share this screen here. Okay. I'm going to try and window capture. What can we window capture? We can window capture. There we go. Does that work? No. I suppose no one can see that. Hang on. I'm going to try and transition back to that. Let's see if that pops up. There we go. Okay, so what I am interested in showing you is today in France, the President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, let's try to transition that again, went to visit le Salon de l'Agriculture, like the fair for agriculture, farmers, etc. And essentially, this is what happened, which is kind of normal whenever he appears in any kind of public context. Chaos kind of ensues. So let's see what happened today.
Les agriculteurs qui ont cherché sont en train d'avancer. Il y a de la bagarre avec le service de sécurité qui a tenté d'empêcher de pénétrer un peu plus loin dans l'allée, mais ils sont encore en train d'avancer. Vous voyez des personnes qui se trouvaient devant l'entrée tout à l'heure. On entend des agriculteurs qui disent « On est chez nous, poussez-vous, laissez-nous rentrer ». Et donc la tension qui est très vive ici. Vous voyez ces agriculteurs qui sont déterminés. Il y a encore des personnes qui sont en train de s'affronter. Il y a des bagarres qui sont en train d'éclater ici. On est vraiment à l'intérieur du salon, on est au milieu des bêtes. Et il y a toutes ces personnes qui sont en train de s'affronter. Il y a des coups de poing qui sont en train de partir devant nous. La situation n'est pas du tout maîtrisée. Il y a des personnes qui sont au sol et qui sont en train de se rouer de coups. Ce sont pour certains des personnes qui étaient devant tout à l'heure et qui avaient l'intention ferme de rentrer dans le salon. Et bien là, ils sont entrés et on est en train de se faire pousser nous aussi. Et attendez, attention, on arrive vers des barrières.
Okay, so so we have indeed a very tense atmosphere, and this is not the first time. Every time Macron tends to go out to some kind of public event with this massive group of security guards, there are tensions and there's a lot of chaos, and obviously In the last few weeks, there have been a lot of protests throughout Europe, especially in the Netherlands, France, and Italy, for a series of new conditions that have been imposed upon agricultural workers in the European community, which basically boil down to three issues. One is that if you own X amount of land, X amount of hectares or whatever of land, you are no longer free to decide how much of that land you could use to cultivate and grow and produce wine, fruits, vegetables, etc. Instead, the European community will tell you what percentage of your land you can use and what percentage of your land must be left alone and not touched for we don't know exactly what reason, to save the planet or to fight global warming or whatever. So a farmer who maybe had 20 hectares of land up until this year, the European community can say you can only use 10, 5, 8, 12 hectares and the rest you can't touch because that's the way it is. First problem. Second problem is the forced use of pesticides, meaning that the European community will tell you which pesticides you must use and you have no choice. And obviously we should all know that's not a good look, not a good thing. And then third, a whole bunch of tax issues. Basically, the goal is to, if not crucify, heavily render the life difficult of the people that produce food. So always curious to see how the machine is always out to destroy some of its most important components. However, there we go. However, I presume that there will be a whole logic of importation, exportation from other countries at very cheap prices, etc., etc. So there is no doubt some kind of twisted capitalistic logic behind that, but it becomes more and more common nowadays that if a politician goes into any kind of public event, it's going to go not so well. So I think they would be kind of wiser to step away from that. Now, let us take a very quick look now. Yesterday, we looked at Zizek. We looked at one of his articles directly written by him or by his collaborators or by ChatGPT or whatever, and we just to kind of get a sense of his use of Lacan and how it's kind of tends to overly complexify issues which, you know, are essentially not so difficult to understand, but it obfuscates them. And you know, with Lacan you always have this air of radical chic and intellectual coolness, and, you know, I'm better than you, etc., etc. And so that's why we want to just go in a very simple way to look over Lacan. However, I did want to dig up some other information on kind of a very simple explanation of Zizek's relation to Lacan, because Zizek is obviously the principal figure who is applying Lacanian theory to contemporary society in 2024, and that's why I kind of found that interesting, because a lot of people claim that psychoanalysis is a dead practice, and I've spoken to many younger psychologists today, and I would kind of sort of agree that psychoanalysis, if it is not dead, it has been heavily watered down. So nowadays there are kind of three phases of treating psychotics. The first phase is called the biological phase, and that means pills pharmaceutical medicine. That's the most important thing today, which kind of reflects the state in which our society is in. The second thing is called kind of a psychocognitive therapy, in which it's kind of like a coaching to help you overcome your problems, but kind of sidestepping the original natures of the traumas that these people suffered, or at least dealing with them very, very delicately. You know, we're not like with Sigmund Freud, where I'm not saying Sigmund Freud is correct at all means, but we're not like a Sigmund Freud is going to say, you know, you're psychotic because you know, you had a sexual encounter at a young age and you dream about horses, and your horses represent, you know, the anus of your father, and then you dream about phalluses, etc., etc. No, today, obviously, very delicately, we try to coach and help these people, and the most important thing is the use of pharmaceutical medicine, and then group theory. So you can kind of see there's a little bit of remnants of Freud and childhood, and then, you know, childhood traumas, but in a very kind of light way, an easygoing way. The most important thing is drugs, obviously, and then there's a little bit of Pierre Félix Guattari, meaning that not truly, but group therapy is important. So it's not the same as when Guattari is saying that you know, a psychosis and schizophrenia is a societal a symptom, which is an effect caused by contemporary society, for example. No, group therapy is also a very watered down version of this, in which, you know, 10 people get together and they say, you know, I'm a schizophrenic too, hi, you know, let's talk and discuss our problems. And I agree, it's all good, and I have absolutely no problems against that. But our question here is kind of the origins of psychoanalysis, and if they still live on today. And Zizek is obviously one of the greatest exponents. So I wanted to dig up something from Slavoj. However, strangely, bizarrely, anything I put into Google comes out with books on sale from all kinds of publishers. So it doesn't quite surprise me that the ultimate goal here by you-know-who is to sell books. Relevant papers come much, much later down the Google list, like page 10 or 12, and the first pages are just full of books. Purchase this, purchase that, blah, blah, blah. So what I actually did, let's see if I can dig it up, is I jumped to our dear old friend ChatGPT, maybe naively believing that he's going to be a little bit less commercial than Google, and I just asked him two quick, simple questions. So my first question to the ChatGPT was the following: what is Slavoj Žižek's reading of Jacques Lacan's psychoanalysis, and how is it relevant today according to Žižek? And what Monsieur ChatGPT answered was the following: Slavoj Žižek's interpretation of Jacques Lacan's psychoanalysis is deeply influenced by his own unique philosophical perspective, which is, I have no clue what that may be, however, drawing on Lacanian concepts to analyze contemporary cultural, political, and societal phenomena. Žižek's reading of Lacan emphasizes the importance of psychoanalytic theory in understanding the complexities of subjectivity, ideology, and the unconscious mind. So here, as we mentioned before, quite surprisingly, we do have one person upholding les traditions anciennes, the old traditions, and On the contrary, very stubbornly insisting that Lacanian psychoanalysis is essential to understanding the contemporary capitalistic society. So going on, we have one key aspect of Zizek's interpretation of Lacan is his focus on the concept of the real, which refers to the unrepresentable, traumatic core of human experience that eludes symbolization and linguistic articulation. So, once again, if we follow the Deleuze Modeste podcast, it would be for any empiricist, this is quite perfectly understandable and perfectly logical. And this is the empirical sensory world between quotation marks, which we are separated from. So with Lacan and Zizek, this is the core of our experience, and it is traumatic insofar as it eludes symbolization and linguistic interpretation. So Zizek argues that the real disrupts the symbolic order. So when Zizek is talking about the real, he's talking about the sensory manifold. We go back to Kant and Hume, etc., etc. Nothing too complex there. Zizek argues that the real disrupts the symbolic order and exposes the inherent contradictions and limitation of language and meaning. So the real, looking at it from a psychological point of view, our consciousness is perpetually in relation to or being affected by the real, the sensory manifold, essential David Hume, and within our unconsciousness, this therefore can cause us consciently to act in a non-symbolic and linguistic articulation. So last night we saw Clérambault. Clérambault was about automatic discourse, where our unconsciousness is just causing us to go on and chatter, and we have no, our ego has no idea. Oops, we're zooming a little bit. Sorry about that. I should not move my hands. Let's zoom out a little bit. Our consciousness has no rationalization or no reason as to why our unconsciousness, which is constantly in a state of being affected and affecting the real, the sensory manifold, etc., etc. So, this disruption, according to Zizek, gives rise to various forms of ideological fantasy and social antagonism, which shape individual and collective identities. So here, we don't even need to go. Yes, we can go to Freud and Lacan. However, it's sufficient also to go back to empiricism, Hume, Kant, etc. And this is the beginnings of Deleuze's thought, that on a deeper unconscious level, we are being perpetually affected and are affecting the sensory manifold, which is the quote-unquote real, which looks much more chic, obviously. And that leads us to essentially rationalizing this unrational, savage realm of the unconscious, and therefore this would lead to what Zizek calls ideology, which I believe it's described as an ideological fantasy in social antagonism. I would describe it as a rationalization, which is non-logical. For example, I'm trying to think of a clean, a polite example. Where I think I use this one, like, I'm gonna die. I have to wait. I lose weight. I can't eat chocolate. No. and then maybe I'll give in to my nervous system, my stomach, and at 3 a.m. I'll wake up and run to the kitchen and just like devastate and eat a chocolate bar and just enjoy it. But then immediately after, I will rationalize that and will say, well, it's only going to happen once. Don't worry. It's kind of like the creation of a kind of fantasy that you want to believe in for these kind of primordial things that can come from your body or your unconsciousness, and then you rationalize it. And then, according to Zizek, that's not the best example. I admit this would kind of be a sort of ideological fantasy. So, furthermore, Zizek emphasizes Lacan's notion of the big other. So, as is typical with Lacan, it's not only the other, it's the big other, capital O, which represents the symbolic authority and social norms that govern our perceptions and interactions. According to Zizek, individuals are constantly engaged in a struggle to uphold the illusion of the big other's coherence and consistency, even as it reveals its fundamental inconsistency and contingency. This tension between the symbolic order and the real, Zizek argues, underpins various forms of ideological belief and political ideology. So, once again, nothing too complex here. We could say that as an individual, I could be engaged in a struggle to uphold the illusion that my preferred political party that I always believed in has not become a bunch of corrupt animals more interested in corruption and getting money from banks and essentially not giving two fucks about the people of the country that they were voted to represent. However, I will struggle, even if I understand it and I know it, and I think this is pretty obvious today. I will still struggle to uphold the illusion of the coherence and consistency of the big party, even as it reveals its fundamental inconsistency and contingency. So I would not, we could talk about politics in any kind of country, and I do not want to get into politics here because I will be burnt alive and massacred to death, because every time today I open my mouth, I get covered with insults. But let's say there may be people in power in 2024 that have demonstrated a great deal of inconsistency and also contingency. However, many people will steadfastly defend them until the end. And so Zizek is simply saying there is a tension between this dualism between symbolic order, meaning I've always voted for the left or the right, and therefore, I must uphold that and I believe in them, and a tension between that and the real, which today could possibly be that, most politicians are corrupt and the whole system needs to be overhauled as soon as possible. So that would kind of be a very simple example of ideological belief, which is banal. That's really simple. So let's go on. According to Zizek, in terms of relevance today, Zizek sees Lacanian psychoanalysis offering critical insights into contemporary issues such as capitalism, ideology, and the proliferation of digital technology. He argues that capitalism functions as a form of ideological fantasy that obscures the underlying antagonisms and contradictions of the social order, perpetuating a sense of alienation and dislocation amongst individuals. We won't get into it now, but The whole issue of social order and capitalism is kind of a very interesting issue which rarely gets touched upon, and it absolutely does exist, although many people tend to deny the force of a continued social order, even under advanced capitalist systems. So that's a whole issue in itself, and we're going to get into a quick example of this. Moreover, Zizek contends that the rise of digital media and virtual reality further complicates the relationship between the symbolic and the real, blurring the boundaries between fantasy and reality and exacerbating the fragmentation of subjective experience. Nothing new here. In this context, Lacanian psychoanalysis provides a framework for understanding how ideological fantasy structures our perceptions of reality and shapes our behavior in an increasingly mediated world. Of course, if you look on our website, Deleuze Modeste, we did a 10-minute preview for our next episode, and we're essentially getting down to this issue, which was already... the other day I watched an old film from the 1970s. It was by Jean-Luc Godard, an absolute genius. The film is called Sauve qui peut, which means that would be translated to, save yourself if you can. And already it was the first film with Isabelle Huppert, a great actress. And Godard had already intuited this very easily in the 19th century. In the 1970s in France, Godard had already intuited this kind of dislocation, this separation from the other, this separation from the self, this kind of coldness and cruelty as a fundamental aspect of contemporary capitalism. So these are things that have been well known for a long time. Overall, Zizek's reading of Lacan's psychoanalysis offers a provocative, insightful, blah, 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 blah. And the second question I asked was, what is Slavoj Zizek's conception of ideology and how does it function in the contemporary world? Could you give an example? So, ChatGPT responds saying Slavoj Zizek's conception of ideology is deeply influenced by his engagement with psychoanalysis, particularly the work of Jacques Lacan. For Zizek, ideology operates as a set of symbolic beliefs and practices that structure our perception of reality and shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. However, what distinguishes Zizek's approach is his emphasis on the unconscious and the role of fantasy in the formation of ideology. In Zizek's view, ideology functions as a form of fantasy that serves to conceal and obfuscate the underlying contradictions and antagonisms of social reality. Individuals are drawn into ideological frameworks that offer imaginary solutions to real problems, of course, providing a sense of coherence and stability in an otherwise chaotic and fragmented world. Ideology thus operates as a form of symbolic mediation that masks the inherent instability and incompleteness of social relations. Moreover, Zizek argues that ideology functions not only through explicit beliefs and doctrines, but also through unconscious mechanisms and symbolic gestures. He emphasizes the role of ideology in shaping our desires and fantasies, influencing our desires and behaviors in ways that may be at odds with our conscious beliefs and intentions. In the contemporary world, Zizek sees ideology as pervasive and omnipresent, permeating every aspect of our lives, from politics to economics to culture and everyday social interactions. One example of ideology in action can be found in the realm of consumer culture. Capitalism promotes a consumerist ideology that equates happiness and fulfillment with the acquisition of commodities and material wealth. This ideology is perpetuated through advertising, media, and popular culture, which constructs fantasies of a perfect lifestyle achievable through consumption. So all very clear. However, beneath the surface of this consumer's fantasy lies the reality, the real, capital R, of Lacan, the reality of exploitation, inequality, and environmental degradation. So this is the simplest of simple examples. I need a new iPhone 15 Pro Max because it's awesome and I'm cool. However, X amount of workers died in the factory, in Bangladesh that day. X amount of workers in an African country died in the mines digging out lithium and live under a horrific dictatorial dictatorship purposely put in there by the Western world in order to extract lithium for iPhones and environmental degradation, obviously. So that's a very simple example. We have an iPhone, and this is I'm cool, and that is ideology, and the real is the actual cost in terms of the real material world of the production of that consumable object, which ideologically causes me to construct a fantasy or an illusion of being, the cool Apple guy, etc., etc. So Zizek argues that the consumerist ideology serves to conceal these underlying contradictions, offering individuals a false sense of satisfaction and fulfillment while perpetuating the logic of capitalist accumulation. So, overall, Zizek's conception of ideology provides a powerful framework for understanding the ways in which symbolic beliefs and practices shape our perception of reality, etc., etc. So I think the example we gave last night was a little bit too complicated to start off with. And Zizek or whoever writes the text tends to obfuscate, make things intentionally more complicated than necessary. But I think going over this, we can see the deployment and the use of Lacan by Zizek fundamentally is nothing too complicated, and this is stuff we've seen in Philosophy 101 with Gilles Deleuze: the real, the sensory manifold, the material world, the unconsciousness is affected by it, but consciously the tendency to create symbolic structures, and according to Zizek, following Lacan, also the tendency on the unconscious level to form symbolic structures already at that level, which I think pre-empiricism, we would have to go back and look at that in philosophy, but before English empiricism, I think that was just, something taken granted for or whatever. However, you have the unconsciousness, which is affected and being affected by this kind of savage, Kant comes to mind, real sensory manifold. However, the unconscious itself begins to structuralize itself in order already on the unconscious level to a certain degree to rationalize its relation to that big other, which is the sensory manifold, the world, the universe. And so we're going to take a 2-minute break right now, and we'll go right back and quickly go back to Jacques Lacan with a very simple and I do believe enjoyable introduction to Lacan. And then we'll shut down in about 20 minutes and let everyone enjoy their Saturday in peace. So I'm going to just go back to our countdown screen for 2 or 3 minutes, just enough time to smoke a cigarette, and I will be right back. So can we pull this transition off? 1, 2, 3, go. See you soon. Okie doke. I've seen. So let us transition back here. And I think I will repeat. Last night we were looking at a very nice, a very simple book on Jacques Lacan, who a friend who is actually a psychoanalyst sent me. And I think last night we read the first few pages, and we got to the point where in the beginning of his career in psychology, the themes closest, essential to him were narcissism, the image, the ideal, and the personality could extend beyond the limits of the body and be constituted within a complex social network. And our example was of this poor young lady, Aimée, who in Paris attempted to kill or harm a well-known Parisian actress, and Aimée herself was very poor. And for Lacan, this was an example of how the identity of Aimée was subsumed by the identity of the actress. She tried to she attacked with a knife, and therefore identity can, according to Lacan, transcend the biological boundaries of the body. So Aimé's identity was literally outside herself. And moving on, analysis. Around the same time that Lacan completed his thesis, he began his analysis with Rudolf Loewenstein, which continued until 1938. Loewenstein had been analyzed by Freud's student Hans Sachs. So, what do we have here? Loewenstein later emigrated to the USA, where I became well known for my work in establishing the program of ego psychology. Okay. So, Loewenstein had been analyzed by Freud's student Hans Sachs, and therefore we can understand the great prestige that Freud still enjoyed in this time. So Lacan moves to studies in philosophy. Instead of confining himself to the standard texts in psychiatry and psychoanalysis, Lacan read widely, with a special interest in the philosophic work of Karl Jaspers, none other than Hegel, and Martin Heidegger. He attended the seminars on Hegel given by Alexandre Koyevin, who we should know, together with many of the thinkers who would leave their mark on the French intellectual life: Georges Bataille, Raymond Aron, Pierre Klossowski, and Raymond Queneau. In 1934, Lacan married Marie-Louise Blondin, the sister of his friend, the surgeon Sylvain Blondin. 3 children were born from this marriage: Caroline in 1934, Thibault in 1939, and Sibylle in 1940. So Jacques Lacan was evidently quite productive in the bedroom. And then we move on to the Marienbad Congress. Lacan made his first intervention at the annual Congress of the International Psychoanalytical Association, held at Marienbad in 1936. He developed the thesis of the mirror phase. And this, of course, is a very well-known and important Lacanian concept, and the original text of this paper is lost. But the brilliant article on the family which Lacan contributed to the Encyclopédie Française in 1938, together with a later version of the paper, presents the argument clearly. So let's move on. The theory of the mirror phase. And finally, we're getting into the substance of some of the more important concepts of Jacques Lacan. Humans are born prematurely. Okay. Left to themselves, they would probably die. Okay. They are always born too early. They can't walk or talk at birth. They have a very partial mastery of their motor functions, and at the biological level, they're hardly complete. So, we are born into the world as kind of these little kinds of larvae, which from Lacan's point of view might not be entirely logical. We better, if we entered into life fully formed, let's say at the biological level at least. So we enter into the world in a thoroughly incomplete way. So Jacques' question was, so how does the child come to master its relation to its body? Let me turn the volume down a little bit here. How does it respond to its pre-maturation and mimicry? So, Lacan's answer is in the theory of the mirror phase. He draws our attention in later texts to an ethological curiosity known as mimicry. And you know that here we learn definitions because we have to understand things well. And I will confess that ethological escapes me at the present moment. Ethology is a branch of zoology that studies the behavior of non-human animals. Okay. Ethological, a branch of knowledge dealing with human character and its formation and evolution. Okay, perfect. Hence, a stick insect may choose to look like a stick. The obvious explanation for this phenomenon is that it protects the animal against predators. But what many investigators found was that those animals which assumed an image or disguise were just as likely to be eaten as those which didn't. The U.S. government has commissioned a survey in the early 1930s involving the rather macabre task of examining the stomachs of some 60,000 near-Arctic birds to confirm this diagnosis by counting the insects which had been swallowed. The ones which had disguised themselves were no less frequent than their more honest companions. So, mimicry, apparently, from a Darwinian point of view, is no guarantee of survival. So, moving on. So, Lacan concludes, if evolutionary biology cannot provide an answer to the question of mimetism with the idea of protection from predators, how can it be explained? So, quite simply, if I'm born as an insect with a long, rigid body, similar to that of a stick or a small tree branch, evolution will lead not all but some of these types of insects to actually mimic or camouflage themselves as sticks. However, in the end, compared to those born the same way, meaning looking like sticks but not camouflaging themselves as sticks, in the end, it's 50-50, and mimicry is no guarantee of survival. So Lacan says, so why do those who mimic a stick do that if it does not guarantee survival? So, Roger Caillois, a French thinker fascinated with the theme of masks, games, and the relation of the human to the animal kingdom, argued that there was a sort of natural law whereby organisms became captured in their environment. Interesting. They will thus take on the coloring, for example, of the space around them. So, from the point of view of Monsieur Roger Caillois, it is not the insect that wants to imitate a stick, it is the environment that is causing that insect to take on the form of a stick. So, captured in an image, Lacan developed this thesis in his work on the mirror phase, combining with observations from child psychology and social theory, and argued for a similar form of imaginary capture for the organism in an external image. So, the important point of view here, organism, external image, insect, image of tree branch. What is this image here? My goodness. The child identifies with an image outside himself, be it an actual mirror image or simply the image of another child. The apparent completeness of this image gives me a new mastery over my body. So, in the 1938 Encyclopedia article, this idea is used to give a brilliant explanation of the inexplicable swings in a child's behavior from a tyrannical or seductive attitude to its opposite. Rather than linking this to a conflict between two individuals, the child and the spectator in this instance, Lacan argues that it derives from a conflict internal to each of them, resulting from an identification with the other party. This is an organizing principle of development rather than a single moment in childhood. If I have identified with an image outside myself, I can do things I couldn't do before. So long insect with stick-like properties finds image of a stick and discovered that through mimicking a stick, in biological terms, evolutionarily developing itself to mimetize or camouflage itself by colors, for example, to look like a stick, has discovered that it can do things it couldn't do before. So as we saw before, this is not a guarantee of survival. This is kind of surplus or an abstract ability that it did not possess before identifying itself with an external image, which, as Lacan says, could be a mirror image, it could be an image of another child. It is an identification with the other. So the image in the mirror, even though it's you, it's just an image that is another, because you do not perceive yourself as when you do look into a mirror. So from here we go to the imaginary. We'll go 3 minutes and we'll shut down here. Mastery of one's motor functions and an entry into the human world of space and movement is thus at the price of a fundamental alienation. Lacan calls the register in which this identification takes place the imaginary. So, our imaginary insect who's born long and just by pure contingency is out there in the forest and he looks like a tree branch or stick, identifies on a certain level, like the child, with the stick. And for Lacan, this identification is the imaginary, which emphasizes the importance of the visual field, and the specular relation, which underlies the child's captivation in the image. So the child is captivated by the image. And let's just check out specular relation. What do we have? Specular Elton John. Thank you. Google is really going to hell, huh? There must be a better search engine than this. Google is just, oh my goodness. We're gonna go get all technical now for a very simple thing. Who's gonna do this? No. It's still not even writing correctly the word. I mean, specular. Well, yeah, but we all know it. I can't believe this is not accepting me. Specular. Hello. I have to go to an Italian dictionary. Anti-reflection. Specular reflectors. Anti-reflective. Okay. So, the specular relation, which should be pretty clear, and the child's captivation in the image. Actually, I'm not sure why we're using specular, because specular, the specular reflection condition is known to be quite useful for investigating the dispersion relation of surface waves in semi-bounded plasmas. In specular logic, oral contradicts spectacle, positioning itself as a paradoxical other. Nope. Specular. Relating or having the properties of a mirror. Okay, so I guess in 3D rendering, specular values of material are kind of like its reflectivity. Okay, so our picture shows this, but all this at a price. If I am in the place of another child, when he's struck, I will cry. If he wants something, I will want it too, because I am in his place. I am trapped in an image fundamentally alien to me, outside of me. I find that quite skeptical. And what does Jacques have to tell us? A blank page. Perfect. Okay, so I think we should just shut down right here. We will get into ego and alienation. So up until now, we have covered kind of the early phase of Jacques Lacan's life. He grew up as a privileged young man in a wealthy family in Paris and went to the Stanislas University. And as an important intellectual, played an important role in the Surrealist movement. He entered into psychology and psychoanalysis out of his own interest. We know that as a young man, Spinoza, strangely enough, was a great inspiration for Lacan, and later he would be interested in studying philosophy, specifically Hegel and Heidegger, so echoes of Slavoj Žižek here. If you're gonna, go for Lacan, Hegel is gonna have an important relation with that, and then he moves on after his important thesis, which was the mirror phrase and mimicry, which we've looked into. And that is the force of an external or image of another, which obviously the mirror could be the mirror image of yourself or another person or another thing, and therefore that other thing is internalized, and this leads to mimicry. And therefore, the captivation of the child who was captured in this image. And this, I think the interesting thing here is just that for Lacan, it's not necessarily a survival mechanism. It does not guarantee survival in any way. It's done through this act of captivation, which leads to the imaginary capture. So, like we read this study of they took 60,000 dead birds and ripped them open to see, the birds that were more camouflaged, better, did they have a higher survival rate? No. So what's the point of camouflaging yourself? No, and that was the question that Lacan was asking himself, and then thanks to, I believe, Roger Caillois, who was a French thinker fascinated with the theme of masks and games, led Lacan to this concept of mirroring, of being captured by an image and mimicking that image, but on an imaginary plane. It's not a question of survival. It's not a question of being the fittest. It's a question of being captivated by an image of another. So I think we're at a pretty good point here. Just the basics of Lacanian psychology. We learned a little about his life, and once again, up until this point, and we're still pretty nascent in our analysis of Lacan. Nothing too inconsistent, which we've seen so far on our Deleuze Modeste podcast. So, as it is late here Saturday night, I am wishing everyone a lovely Saturday evening. We will probably be away for a week or two due to some travel necessities, but we will be back, and I hope everyone will be well in the meantime, and looking forward to our next session. So thank you. Take care. Until next time. Bye-bye.